Hello, and welcome to section 4 of Unit 5 for International Procurement. Today we'll be looking at regional and international trade agreements. So by the end of this section, we should be able to explain the types and examples of trade agreements and state the benefits and demerits of trade agreements. So there are some types of agreements. We have the bilateral trade agreements and then unilateral trade agreement. So bilateral trade agreement confers things or confers favored trading status between two nations by giving them access to each other's markets. Is necessary trade and economic growth. So, for example, between Ghana and US, if we agree that okay, now you can come to US and do this business, and we can also come and do that business and all that. So that becomes a bilateral agreement, like two country system agreement. Then we come to the unilateral trade agreement, which is also a trade agreement in a commerce treaty that a nation imposes with regards to others. For example, it happens when a country imposes a trade restriction such as tariffs, sorry, on all imports, and it is also implied to a state that lifts a tariff on its partners' imports, even to not reciprocate. So, a unilateral agreement is a type of agreement or a type that a country gives to um, its imports. So, for example, you could say you could give some form of restrictions on an import to cannabis in Ghana, and that becomes a unilateral trade agreement. And we move on to multilateral trade agreements. Multilateral trade agreements are commerce treaties among three or more nations. So the agreement reduces tariffs and make it easier for business to import and export. So the multilateral agreement is where we have about three people or three countries coming together for this form of trade agreements. So examples of trade agreements, we have the North American Free Trade Agreement. So for the North American Free Trade Agreement, it comprises of some selected countries in the North America, like Canada, Mexico, and the United States, creating a trilateral treaties bloc in North America. So the agreement came into force in January 1st, 1994, and suspended the 1988 Canada. United States free trade agreement between the United States and Canada as well. So then we come to the EU. So for NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And come to the EU, the European Union. It's a political and economic union of 27 member states that are located primarily in Europe. Its members have combined areas of 4 million kilometers and an estimated total population of about 447 million. It has its headquarters in Brussels in Belgium. So mostly for EU refers to the number of countries in the European Union, and then the NAFTA also talks about national or the North American Free Trade Agreement. And we come to COMESA, that is or the COMSA, that is the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. Is a free trade area with 21 member states, stretching from Tunisia to Eswatini in Western and Southern Africa. So for the Western and Southern Africa, they also have what they call the COMSA, so Common Market for Eastern and South African um, markets. So here they come together and then they have that multilateral agreement for each other. Then there's also CEFTA, the Central European Free Trade Agreement is a trade agreement between non-EU countries members of which are now mostly located in Southeast Europe. Official languages of contracting states are six, and they are Romania, Montenegro, Bosnia, Albania. All these countries are um, also have some form of trade agreement called the CEFTA. Then there's ECOWAS, that's for West African states. So it is also some example of a trade agreement which has the Economic Community of West African States, also known as the ECOWAS, is a regional political and economic union of 15 countries located in West Africa. So the chairperson is the person of um, uh, the chairperson is the president of the Republic of Ghana. But as at when the book was being written, the chairperson was Mr. Mahamadou Issoudou. The headquarters is at the Federal Capital Territory in Nigeria. So benefits of a trade agreement. So through independence, nations can use the trade to access one another's resources, and that's very true. I mean, the benefit of the trade agreement is that it serves as a conduit for resources to be capitalized on. Again, it provides non-military ways to resolve disputes. So that is also true. Where we think that you are taking our lands, we may not want to provide non-distributive ways of um, solving the issue. But with this one, since everybody is well understood to have his or her name or his or her country in an agreement, there's that I mean there's that leeway of okay, then let's sit down and solve the issue amicably. Again, um the benefit of trade agreements also helps to promote and understand and dialogue between countries. So there's also promotion and understanding as well as dialogue between countries. So basically, like having specific um, discussions with each other, or member states having discussions with each other to solve specific problems. Then also it builds on socio-cultural similarities. That's like sharing a common language and culture and encourage closer integrations. Yes. So the benefit of a trade agreement also comes into play where after there have been some form of an agreement, there's that socio-cultural similarities in academic work. So, for example, we share a common language, you share some common cultural features that also helps in the closer integration of organizations for further or for future benefits. Advantages of increased international trade. So if international trade is increased, then there's increased economic growth. There's a need for an increased economic growth, again, a more dynamic business climate, um, and then low uh, government spend because you then tend to spend very low on your, government then tends to spend very low, since something that they may want to buy, they may get it from an agreed party or an agreed person or an agreed country that's having this form of trade agreement with you, with the government. And then foreign direct investment, and that is also another point where there's always the need for foreign direct investment from other countries into your country, as well as you also being a foreign direct investment to other equally um, poor African countries. So the advantage of international trade also serve as a foreign direct investment too. And then again, expertise, the skills of people or the skills of individuals from different countries are respected and then capitalized upon. Again, there's technology transfer. That is also a very good important point. So all that you are doing, if we have a technological way of getting it done easily, then through these agreements you may get to know, and then um, it will be given for you to I mean use, or that way may be shown for you to um, employ. When it comes to some disadvantages, again, for increased international trade, it may increase our sourcing jobs. So you may want to give out um, your competences, some of your competences to these international um, expatriates. Again, theft of intellectual property. So you would invite them, they will come into your country, you'll be working with them, and it's likely some of these countries or some of these firms from various international countries may steal your intellectual ideas or your intellectual property, crowd out domestic industries. So when we allow international international firms to flood out or to operate freely in our countries, it floods out the domestic industry. So, for example, um, the introduction of malls, with the China malls and all that, now it then tends to affect the traditional malls we used to have in Ghana, their sales and maybe their growth rates and all that. Again, poor working conditions. So, sometimes because we are at the receiving end, we are sometimes seen um, as the poor. Um, we are sometimes seen as a cheap labor, and because of this, or because we are seen as a cheap labor, the higher or the powerhouses of other countries come and then get cheap labor here, and then they render onto some of these or some of these employees or some of these people working with them, render some poor conditions of work to them. So that's also another disadvantage of increased trade. Again, degradation of natural resources. So these agreements mostly fall into place through natural resources. They know that they will get gold from us, they know they will get oil from us. So that is where countries may want to agree. But then if these agreements are done, then there is higher um, feed, or there's higher feed on the natural resource we have, and that may bring about degradation of natural resource and destruction of native culture. I mean, the mingling of your culture with other cultures can always be a destructive tool to affect your cultural background, and hence your heritage may be lost. And then we come to reduce tax revenue. So here, since these agreements sometimes come in with free taxes, then there's the need. or there's also the tendency of um, people coming in or countries joining in through these international trade agreements, not paying taxes, and that would affect the um, the government's revenue on taxes. So in this section, we looked at the type and examples of trade agreements, the benefits and demerits of trade agreements. Thank you and see you next time.